plenty coming up. The cost of living crisis is playing on everybody's minds, and we've spoken about it a lot on this programme, on the solutions that might just help us all. And top of that list, you know, work. But there is one other thing that really can help: jobs and good pay. We'll be speaking about that with expert guests at the Frontline and those who have been in government and have lived the life of trying to create wealth, create employment and make life better for all of us. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news today. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule-breaking parties while it was being drafted. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says people deserve to know the truth. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have, because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history, which could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Crisis talks are underway to try and keep passenger and freight trains running if it goes ahead. Secretary-General of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers Union, Mick Lynch, told GB News he's confident members will vote on strike action.
The alternative to that is surrender, where we just accept ever-continuing drops in standard of living. We surrender the argument of the cost of living to the rich in this country, and we strip out jobs and face a railway system that is degraded and could become a hostile environment for people that need passenger assistance, women travelling alone, and people that need assistance with ticket offices and all the rest of it. Plus, of course, the risks they're taking with the infrastructure itself.
Shoppers have seen hundreds of items on their food bill rise by more than 20% over the last 2 years. That's as the number of supermarket discounts have fallen. Consumer Group, which analysed 21,000 items from 8 major supermarkets, and fizzy drinks saw the biggest average price rise, with chocolate seeing the lowest. The Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat later today over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. New legislation is expected in early June. Former Conservative MP Michael Brown told GB News that Democrats are appealing to Irish American voters ahead of the midterm elections.
I think this is just straightforward electioneering inside the Democratic Party from the point of view of Pelosi and her Democrat colleagues who are facing a very difficult fight in November. Secondly, bluntly, we've been here many times before, Paul. The fact is, Nancy Pelosi is bullying the British government. It will have to be solved. I think most people in the EU acknowledge that it is very unfair on the people of Northern Ireland.
Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the southern port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as Russia presses for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has proposed a deal with his allies to secure Russian compensation for the damage its forces have caused in Ukraine.
We invite partner countries to sign a multilateral agreement and create a mechanism ensuring that everyone who has suffered from Russian actions can receive compensation for all losses incurred. Based on such an agreement, Russian money located in the jurisdiction of partner countries should be arrested, frozen or confiscated and transferred to a special fund that would compensate everyone that has suffered.
And pharmacists will have greater freedoms to choose alternative hormone replacement therapy if the original prescription is out of stock. The government's HRT Supply Task Force, which was set up to tackle widespread shortages, has agreed to give pharmacists more control. It says low stock forced some menopausal women to do online swaps or buy medicine on the black market. Health Minister Maria Caulfield says the sudden increase in demand since the end of last year has put pressures on supply.
I want to reassure women there's over 70 products in the UK, and there's only really about 10 or less that are experiencing this shortage. So for the vast majority of products, we have got plenty of supply. And for those small numbers, we're introducing measures to make sure that those supplies are back up and running.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Alistair.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. The cost of living crisis is all too real for most of us, but the political debate around it and possible solutions has been pretty barren. Much of it has centred on finding ways to give cash to those feeling most of the pain. Peter Lilly, no wishy-washy Liberal he, called on this programme last weekend for the restoration of the £20 increase in universal credit. Labour's still banging on about a windfall tax on the energy giants. Well, the Treasury is said to quite fancy that, but Number 10, we are told, remains totally opposed. However, the evil at the pounding heart of the cost of living crisis, inflation, is a slippery customer. In truth, there's not a great deal that the government can do about it in the short term. Most of the current inflation is caused by soaring energy prices, partly due to the world economy emerging from the coronavirus, and partly due to the world rightly turning its back on Russian oil and gas as a result of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Oh, and the Bank of England must also take some of the blame. Too much easy money at low interest rates chasing prices up and fueling rather than controlling inflation. Taxes could, of course, be cut. Many Tories are calling for that right now. And in the medium to long term, the Attorney-General, Suella Braverman, says we must incentivise investment. Profits mean more research. Profits mean more jobs. But there is another thing that can really help tackle the cost of living crisis, and that is jobs, work, and well-paid work. It produces more goods and services, which can help bring down prices. It puts more money in people's pockets, more than benefits. It also gives dignity. So I uttered a noisy hurrah when the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, published the latest employment numbers midweek. While more than ever are in work, there are a staggering number of unfilled jobs, 1.3 million of them. And that's more than the total of the unemployed. The hard-hit hospitality sector is just one example. It alone has 171,000 vacancies. Now, as one City commentator observed, it's even better news for those who want to work. I quote, "It's a situation that's forcing employers to adopt whatever methods they can to tempt workers to jump ship." As the ONS itself put it, the Great Resignation is still very much in action, with an estimated total of 994,000 workers resigning from their current positions for new jobs. And finally, Hannah Slaughter, an economist at the Resolution Foundation, no great friend of the government, said some people are taking advantage of a tight jobs market to move roles or secure retention bonuses. Now, the ONS had mixed messages on pay. It confirmed a 7% increase in total pay with a 4.2% rise in regular pay, excluding bonuses, but a total pay growth of just 1.4%. That will not match current inflation. But I'd argue that it's better than not working or living on even more deflated benefits. So today I am exploring what we can do to help folk who really do want to work and find jobs. How can pay be improved? How can productivity be rewarded? If you're in work and paying taxes, I'm guessing that you'd prefer more joined you than relied upon you and your taxes to help them make ends meet. I have great guests from a former employment minister to the, sitting right next to me now, the former Director General of the CBI. One of my rising stars is also here on the sofa, an entrepreneur, a top guy who has created his own business, got himself a job and employs other people. We've also got someone from a headhunter employment agency world as well. No lectures, just good ideas to help you, help yourself and help the rest of us. GB News is the People's Channel, so let me know what you think, what your experiences are. GB Views at gbnews.uk, Twitter, Facebook and all the rest of it. So, great conversations to come. Let's start with the first, and that's my old friend Stephen Timms, MP, a former Labour Financial Secretary, number 2 at the Treasury, in fact, and importantly, a former Employment Minister. He's currently the chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. Stephen, really good of you to join us this afternoon. Philosophically, absolutely at the heart of what you used to do in the Treasury, what you used to do in the Department for Employment, isn't work always better than being on benefit?
Yes, I think it is. And good news in the employment figures this week was that the number of people claiming unemployment benefit is the lowest it's been for nearly 50 years. And as you said, there are now actually the number of vacancies is actually less than the number of people who are unemployed. And you know, we've never been in that position before. But there is a very striking thing in these employment figures, that the number of people in work at the moment is actually 500,000 less than the number who were in work before the pandemic. There's quite a large number of people who are not claiming unemployment benefit, but they're not working. They seem to have given up, particularly older people. Maybe they're dipping into their pensions to keep themselves going at the moment instead of working. And one thing the government must do, and the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions acknowledged this in an exchange I had with her in the House this week, is to work out ways to encourage those people to come back into work so that they're able to contribute to the economy. We do need to raise the number of people in work.
Have you got specific ideas, and maybe Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State you referred to there, has got her own ideas as well, more that we can do, and you as opposition and government, to get those people who do want to work into those jobs that need filling? And I was just saying in my introduction, you know, nearly 200,000 in the hospitality sector alone.
Two specific ideas. At the moment, if you're not claiming unemployment benefit, there isn't really any help available from job centres or from public services to help you get into work. That, I think, is going to have to change. Some of those people who've just decided not to work, they're not going to claim universal credit, but they don't want to work at the moment. We do need to find ways of helping them look for and find opportunities in employment to take up some of this very large number of vacancies we've got at the moment. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we have to look at the way we organise our job centre and employment support services. There's a very large number of people who are out of work on health grounds, and quite a lot of them would like to work and almost certainly could work if they had the chance. Now, we've discovered during lockdown, quite a lot of people can work from home. And for some people who, because of disability, need to stay at home, you know, we need to work out how we can get them into some of the vacancies that are in place at the moment. Now, to do that effectively in a local area, we need the job centre, local colleges and the health service to be working closely together. And I think that means reorganising employment support so it's organised more locally, so it can bring those local partners together to give people the best possible support if they're out of work on health grounds to get into and take up some of these vacancies that are available at the moment.
A bit later on in the programme, I'm talking to someone from Bournemouth University who, interestingly, is doing exactly that with undergraduates to steer them at where they can find good, promising and interesting jobs.
That's what we need, I think.
Absolutely right. Final one, and it's a tough one, and it takes me back to when Tony asked Frank Field to think the unthinkable he did, and he was promptly sacked for it. A lot of people told me when I tweeted hurrah for the ONS numbers, as indeed, to be fair, Stephen, you've just said it's good stuff, the overall picture is good. People told me me I was wrong, because these are 0-hour contracts or they're low-paid jobs. They're not worth having. I mean, the blunt point is this. If it's really eat or heat, we have to cut our cloth according to what's out there, do we not?
Yes, we do. And, we have seen increases in the national minimum wage, or the national living wage, as it's now described. But there is more to be done. And I think there are some real challenges around people who are in the gig economy. That's why I was so disappointed that yet again, the government missed out the employment bill from the recent Queen's speech. They've been promising an employment bill for years now to look at the employment rights of people working in the gig economy. They've missed it out again. And that really does need to be addressed so that some of these problems can be sorted out.
Stephen, great food for thought there. Really grateful again for your time. I know it's a busy day for you, so thank you, and lovely to see you again. Take care.
Thank you, Alistair.
Stephen Timms there, former Labour number 2 in the Treasury and Employment Minister, with genuinely some terrifically lively food for thought there. And sitting next to me, as I said earlier on, I'm delighted to be joined by a very old friend of mine, Lord Digby Jones. He's the former boss of the CBI. And sitting next to him, I don't know if the camera can pick it up as well, because he's also been listening to that conversation, is another friend of mine, Sahel Ahmed, who previously featured on this programme as one of our rising stars. Both were listening to that conversation. Digby first, I've got questions I want to ask you, given your background and your expertise, but I thought 2 really exciting observations from a former Labour Treasury Minister. Let's shake up the job centres, employment exchanges, get them out there, matching people to aspiration, to job, to wealth creation. And you don't have to be on benefit to get help looking for a job.
No, and it's interesting. And can I just say good morning, afternoon, Alistair? It's lovely to see you and lovely to be back. It's interesting, you see, because the Conservative government is getting criticised by a lot of backbench Conservative MPs say this is not conservatism as we knew it. And Stephen Timms, of course, was in probably the more centrist Labour government there's been for a long, long time. Blair's government was a centrist party. Yeah. So really, there'll be a piece of paper between the, if you might call the ideological approach to this, between Stephen Timms and government. Where there is room for constructive criticism is in delivery. It's all the delivery mechanisms. How do you get the ideas that Stephen had in your remarks at the top of the show, your thoughts, how do you get that to work in a completely restructured economy and at the same time on a bedrock of sound money? You know, I mean, if you look at Ken Clarke, Gordon Brown and George Osborne, parties went out of the window because they all pursued the philosophy of sound money. Yeah. And therefore now you've got a resilient economy. And I'm sure this doesn't feel like resilience if you're facing eat or heat, if you're facing a problem with your pay not going up and meeting inflation. It doesn't sound resilient if you're anywhere else in the world and you're having problems where wheat isn't coming out of Ukraine or whatever. But it actually is a more resilient economy than the last time you had big shocks. You know, we've had Brexit, pandemic and Ukraine. In the 70s, you had the massive oil rise shock of 73. You had a load of pretty damaging socialist policies then hit. And you then had following that the Thatcherite change with the big nasty medicine, if you like. Yeah. Now, all of that, the economy wasn't sound enough and resilient enough not to have massive recessions, huge inflation. This time round, you've got those shocks, but you've got the resilience of money. Hence, you don't have massive unemployment.
Absolutely. But given all of that, and I completely accept your opening comment about a lot of people saying this isn't very conservative stuff, would it be both conservative and right to say to some of those who are on benefit, out of work, shouting 0 hours contracts, and I heard what Stephen said about the employment legislation, and, I'm not going to do that because it's not pay, and in the same breath saying, it's eat or heat, someone's got to read the Riot Act a bit as well, have they?
Well, and Stephen said something there which I thought, ding dong, absolutely rang the bell, and I hope for a lot of people watching this show, the solution to this is local. You've got 200,000 vacancies in hospitality. If there was ever a local economy, it's hospitality. You're going to have construction, massive vacancies in construction, local building sites. And there is a local solution. And to get into the harmonisation of some government policy, but the matching of people who actually are looking for more money and thinking to themselves, actually, I would go back into the world of work if it was worth my while, and taking a bit of pain themselves in a job that perhaps wouldn't be their first choice in terms of what it is, or indeed that it wouldn't be the hours they want to do, the gig economy point. But if you actually got a little bit of compromise, but did it at a local level, so you took the politics out of it, the ideology out of it, and what you did is you got the provider of the job, the person who wants it, and a facilitator where it isn't money as the solution, it's the facilitation of the matching the need with the talent. I think they're onto something. But the trouble is, ideology gets in the way. I fear for an economy where you're still going to have the old canards come up about inflation's at this, my pay must be more than that. And I think the economy will come back from this. It's going to be painful for a while. And also, which is also important, and you'd expect me to say this, Alistair, and I've been talking to you on programmes, we worked it out earlier, didn't we? 22 years we've been working. And I don't know whether you know this, actually, viewers, but this man took my television virginity. In January 2000, when I joined the CBI, you were the first person to interview me on live television.
Good Morning Britain.
It was.
I remember it well.
And I've been going on about it ever since. If you want to make sure that you are equipped to exploit a market like this to get more money, get skilled. Without doubt, the one protection you have and the one facility you have to get more is education and training. And if anybody here has got a child listening to this or is in a position to influence a teenager, whatever you do, get them to understand they'll have a lifetime to regret it if they don't equip themselves with a skill. Because, and you said in your opening piece, the real secret to generating more profit out of which you get tax, out of which you build schools and hospitals, it's not rocket science, is become productive. How do you become productive? You have a better skilled economy.
Final point to you, and then I'm going to bring Sohail into the conversation. And this is about ideology. It's about hard politics as well as economics. The other thing, which is vital to get good effort out of people and get them into jobs, is to say, we'll pay you X and you will keep as much of that as is possible.
Yes.
Either via low rates of taxation, or even more importantly, we've talked about this many times in the past, here's a big old stock of money that you can earn before you pay any tax or national insurance. Moving in the right direction, then suddenly came back a little bit. Are you still a big drum beater for that?
Yeah, I'm becoming more of a drum beater to say that we ought to take so many more people out of taxation. Rather than, I prefer both. But rather than dropping basic rate income tax, I would rather say tax will not hit you at all until you're earning good money. And the reason for that is a lot of these jobs, whether they're gig economy or not, they won't be massive pay. But they will, if you can say that the private sector can afford this, but you'll keep it all.
Yes.
Then we're on to something.
Takes a big old chunk of bureaucracy.
Well, of course. Yeah. And the other point is, always remember this: you've never made a poor man rich by making a rich man poor. Sure. It might actually win you votes on a strike ballot, but believe me, it has never ever solved an economic issue like the one we're talking about. You can't just put up tax rates at the top end. Politically, you might want to, but it won't get you the revenue where we're talking about actually making sure the economy can create wealth and then distribute it at what we may call, not pejoratively, more at the bottom end of the wage scale.
Yeah. What's it like at the front line? You talked to me months ago about setting up a business, having your dreams, your ambitions. You faced quite a lot of barriers. He's just talking about people knocking on your door saying, I'm going to buy your product, I'm going to come to your restaurant, Eggoland, I'm going to enjoy it and what have you. What's it like right now as we move towards the end of May?
Good afternoon, Stuart. Good to be back. Well, it's very challenging. A lot more challenging than I actually thought it would be. Especially, like Mr. Digby said, you know, it's COVID, lockdowns, the Ukraine, and, you know, the whole situation is just, feels like it's just one thing after the other. And the people who suffers is people like on the people on the front line, and they're really feeling the pressure and the heat. It's not easy. I mean, I have to, the national insurance tax gone up. My employees are complaining that they're not getting enough money because they're getting a lot of portion of that wages going towards the tax. So, and on the other hand, business is not that good because the inflation, we're in inflation, right? I mean, people are not making enough money so that they can't really afford to go out and eat out like before, So they rather just go get some groceries somewhere cheaper and cook at home.
Are you still trying to expand the business? Because again, when we talked before, there was the one restaurant, but you had dreams and visions.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. The dream is still there, but will it happen in the timescale that I thought? I don't know, because now I have to keep this brand alive. I have to keep it afloat, and I have to pump more money in.
Did it surprise you at any stage how difficult it was to get people who were willing to work for you?
It's funny because a few months ago, when me and you were sitting in the same place and we talk about that, there wasn't enough staff to cover the hospitality sector. Remember, there was like people paying crazy amount of money for a chef somewhere in the paper it came.
Yeah, I remember.
And now there is unemployment. There's 2,000 people in the unemployed. 200,000, is it? Something like that, right? You said. So now it's different because it's very tricky because now the people in the hospitality sector, they can't afford to pay because there is not enough income and business being generated. So it's like catch-22. What do? Do you get rid of people, or do you keep staff low and trying to keep up with the other costs and the taxations and stuff? Or do you bring more people in and then lose on this end? Yeah. So it's a really tricky situation.
Please do.
Are you, because I watch, Pat and I watch you, and I saw that programme when you came on for the first time, and when you said at the end of it, and we'll have you back again and see how you're going, you obviously meant it, and it's great to see. The shift is the 200,000 to which you refer isn't unemployment, it's vacancies. And the problem is, can you get people to work for the money you can afford to give them? And if you've got the problem...
Minus the national insurance he has to take away.
The point we were saying about, and they're paying something. So that if you were having this conversation and you were in one of the northern cities of this country, it would be even worse. Not the vacancy, the fact that they're not earning enough money. And what I want to ask you is, are you finding that you're losing staff to someone who's prepared to pay them more?
Absolutely, because the thing is,
that's a problem.
Well, that was his passing reference to chefs. That's exactly what we talked about last time. Find a good chef who's a really flexible man or woman up for it and what have you.
And he's off down the road.
He's off down the road.
So it's something that, for example, look, my business is not generating enough money because simply a lot of people are not coming in because it's nothing to do with the food, it's because the money. They don't have enough. For example, students, people who work in the offices and stuff like corporate workers, they come outside of London, they try the travelling fees and this, that, whatever, it all adds up. So
I'm going to have to pause it because we're coming up to past, but he knows already I want him back at 1 o'clock. I'm going to ask you if you've got a bit of spare time, if you can join us again at 1 o'clock as well, because there's lots more still to talk about. And between then and now, you'll hear from people who are recruiters, you'll hear from people who are trying to match skilled young people to jobs and what have you. And I'd love just to continue this conversation with both of your takes, and you can talk to each other as much as you like. But for now, Sahel and Digby, thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Start. And Stephen earlier on. Great start. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. What brilliant, lovely friends I've got. Lots more still coming up on today's programme. Overnight, the Russians have claimed victory in its months-long battle to conquer the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. We'll be discussing that next, but first let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry with sunny spells, but cloudier with some showery rain in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Zooming into the southwest, and there will be a mostly dry afternoon here, with warm sunny spells for most and just a low risk of isolated showers. The southeast will also have a dry afternoon with plenty of warm sunny spells. With light winds, it will feel pleasant in the sunshine. There'll also be plenty of warm sunny spells on offer across southern Wales this afternoon, but the odd light shower is also possible. We can expect slightly cloudier conditions across the northwest, but still with some warm sunny spells at times. The odd shower is also possible here through the afternoon, but remaining dry for most. It's a similar story as we cross the Pennines into northeast England, remaining dry this afternoon for most with some sunny spells, but the odd shower is possible, feeling pleasant in the sunshine. As we move north, there's generally a cloudier picture with some showery outbreaks of rain at times across southern Scotland, although the odd brighter spell is also likely. The weather for Northern Ireland follows a very similar theme this afternoon, remaining rather cloudy for all with only limited sunny spells and some showery rain likely at times. It will remain rather cloudy with some rain in the northwest this evening, but drier and brighter elsewhere, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 32 minutes past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule breaking while it was being drafted. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history as 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies vote on action over pay. Network sources say it could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as Russia presses for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. The Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat later today over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Alistair.
Thanks, Bethany. And indeed, as you heard in Bethany's news, last night the Russians claimed the last troops in the Azovstal steel works had surrendered, allowing them to claim the final conquest of Mariupol. Their problems in the Donbass region to the northeast of Mariupol continue amid fierce fighting and claims of Ukrainian successes. But with Mariupol under control, it may allow the Russians to push west, complete the South Coast corridor. That begs an even bigger question. Where next? It makes the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss's intervention this morning in the newspapers all the more interesting. She wants NATO to arm Moldova, a former Soviet satellite, but now an independent nation and NATO member. But like Ukraine, there are pockets of pro-Russian folk too, not least in the breakaway region of Transnistria. So to Putin, it's a bit of an open door. To discuss all of that, I couldn't be more delighted than to be joined by my next guest, a good friend of mine, Sir Christopher Mayer. Christopher's a former ambassador to the United States and, of course, a former senior number 10 man as well. Christopher, good of you to break into your afternoon to spend a few minutes with us. Good to see you and thank you. Two chunks as per the introduction. First of all, the significance strategically and diplomatically of the fall of Mariupol.
Well, it's a bit of a cheek for the Russians to claim a massive victory by finally taking prisoner the 1,500 troops who were left behind in the bunkers of the steel plant, because they've been attacking Ukraine for almost 3 months, and for the massive Russian army to take that time to take one city is quite extraordinary. It's more of a tribute to the Ukrainian defenders than to the Russian attackers, to be perfectly honest with you. But it is a strategic gain because you can see that what Putin is trying to do is to seal off Ukraine from any maritime access, either to the Azov Sea or to the Black Sea. And this is one more piece in that particular military jigsaw puzzle.
And that's a significant concern for us and everybody else around the world in terms of Ukraine breadbasket status and the rest of it. If they control it, they control what comes in and what goes out of those ports.
Well, exactly. It actually is a form of strangulation on Ukraine. As the world community starts to complain about the lack of Ukrainian exports, it'll be interesting to see whether Putin makes any allowance of this or shows any willing to make concessions in return for something else. I just don't know. I don't know whether he cares about this or whether he doesn't. Because in the world, among people who depend on the grain that comes from Ukraine are a lot of countries that have so far been pretty neutral in their attitude to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia.
We don't have time to go too far into India, Pakistan and others, but I take your point, and folk at home listening to our conversation will have taken
and
it
the Middle
as
East,
well.
and the Middle East,
and
as
indeed
well.
the Middle East. The second chunk, as per my introduction, Christopher, that I wanted to ask you about was Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, given a major interview this morning in the Telegraph, and they have taken, I think probably quite rightly as their headline, Truss calling for the increased arming of Moldova. Is she right in that assessment and that call?
Well, you've got to be anxious about the fate of Moldova. There's already been a breakaway state, Russian-dominated state, from Moldova called Transnistria. I mean, we're really into the sort of finer points, obscure points of the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the last century. But there is a danger and a threat to Moldova from Russia. It is not imminent, and one wonders whether there would be any troops available that could do anything. However, what I would say to you, Alistair, is this, that Moldova, I think, comes into a different category of debate for the NATO allies, for the NATO powers, which is, how does this end? Because there are two things that we're attracted by in this story. One is the day-to-day battles. Mariupol has now fallen to the Russians. What next tomorrow? Attacks on Luhansk. These are day-to-day, week-by-week things. But there is a big question underlying all of this, which needs to be addressed now, which is, how does this end? And part of the how does this end debate is, what will the future security structure of Europe be to take account of Putin's aggression, if he remains leader of Russia, that is?
Well, It won't surprise you, Christopher, to know that that's one of the things that we'll be looking at on the programme tomorrow. So if your telephone rings this afternoon or this evening, you'll know who it is. Meantime, love to both of you, and thank you very much indeed for lending us a few minutes of your precious time this Saturday afternoon. Always good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Alistair.
Bless you. Sir Christopher Mayer, former British ambassador to the United States and indeed to Germany, with food for thought. And as I say, we will be looking at how Ukraine ends in the programme tomorrow and what happens next. But do take time out, if you've got time, to look at that Liz Truss interview. It's online, but it's also in the Telegraph newspaper. Fascinating stuff. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including talking about a groundbreaking new app that could help the next generation choose the best career for them. Yes, it's that Bournemouth University thing I was talking about with Digby, Sohal and Stephen Timms. All of that and more after this break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. It's coming up to 1:45 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. The rail unions are targeting the Jubilee weekend and our supermarket shelves in what they say could be the most widespread industrial action on the network since the general strike back in the 1920s. The action's over pay, redundancies and work practices. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, will be briefing the Prime Minister early next week, and the rail operators are drawing up contingency plans to avoid the worst effects. But what might those worst effects actually be? I'm delighted to be joined now by a good friend of this programme, Richard Bartlett, who is a supply chain expert and indeed the owner of Export Unlocked. And there he is. Good to see you and thanks for joining us. Targeting the Jubilee is one thing and it may be slightly counterproductive in terms of how the public feel about it. But food and oil supplies are potentially much more serious, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, Alistair, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing this, Alistair, as you know, for the past 3 to 4 months when we've been talking on this particular show and other shows of the GB News, highlighting the supply chain issues. Supply chain seems to be a huge issue at the moment, not just what we're going to talk about today, but many things that are going to be hitting us in the coming months. And, you know, we already saw recently, I saw on the news earlier, they were talking about pharmaceutical issues with food, and we're seeing pharmaceuticals with tablets and other things that are being shorted. There's a huge shortage because the problem we have, Alistair, is that we're so reliant on the supply chain. Supply chain for the consumer is everything. the whole chain is working. If that chain's not working, or there's a delay, or there's extra costs, there's delays at ports, there's delays everywhere else, it has a huge effect, because these are normally ordered within a period of time. They're not ordered tomorrow for next week. They're ordered in advance. And if that advance rule of 3 months starts to slow down, it has a huge effect. And we're certainly seeing that. We're certainly seeing price increases. There's no question about that. I've been doing some studying on the price.
Hang on a minute, Richard. Before you come to the pricing bit of it, while you were talking, and you know a number of people enjoy our conversations on television, others do it on radio, and we were showing two crucial images I want to point out to our friends on radio. One were empty shelves on supermarkets, and the other was a great big HGV lorry. Tell me this from your point of expertise. I didn't know that supermarket chains, let alone the oil companies, still relied a good deal on the railways. I thought it either went by lorry or, in the case of oil, it went by pipe. Am I wrong?
Well, yeah, the majority, yes, obviously the supply chain's changed. But if you remember last year, Tesco's, one of the biggest supermarket chains in the UK, announced they was using the rail. There was heavily reliance on the rail because they wanted to make it a lot easier for the food supply over the Christmas period. So they're heavily reliant on the rail. So they've changed. And what a lot of people are doing in the supply chain, the way they're planning, Alistair, they're actually planning on different elements. So they're going now to the train service from Spain and other places. There is a great network there. The problem is now that's been affected. And obviously with the Jubilee coming up, obviously it's just bad news and bad news to the consumer. On one hand, they're getting extra prices. They're getting shortage of food where they can bring it down to London, and then they can't get to London. Or if they're in London, they can't get through London. So it's a huge challenge. And just as we've gone through COVID, I think it's the last thing everybody needs at the moment in the UK.
I interrupted you to explain what folk had been looking at on television earlier. You were about to launch into your thought on prices. We're all talking about the cost of living crisis. To what extent have disruptions in the supply chain made that even worse?
I think it's huge, Alistair, and I think we're only seeing the tip of it. I think one of the comments that we made, obviously I won't go into too much detail about Ukraine, but Ukraine will have a huge effect on the supply chain and cost. We'll see huge cost. I mean, just give you an example, 46% of our sunflower oil comes from the UK, 16% of corn, 12% of wheat. That's a huge effect to the poorer families. I think we have to be very clear here. This is affecting the poorer families where they're seeing huge increases. And they're obviously not so, we talked about, I was listening to your show earlier, about the cost of living and taxing and everything else. It has a huge effect. We're seeing effects because obviously the food coming in is bought from all over the world and the supply chains are all struggling. Obviously, you've got border checks now in the UK. So the UK now on the 1st of January adopted full border checks for products coming into the UK. That has delays, lots of delays there. There's delays obviously in China all around the world because China's on zero COVID. So again, that has a huge effect from a 32, 36 day around turnaround. We're now talking 40 to 60 days. And we're also seeing a pattern, Alistair, which nobody's probably thought about as a consumer. We're seeing a different pattern of the way people buy. People now are buying things, they're frightened of something not being on the shelf next week. So when they go in the store, rather than buying one when they see it, they're buying 2 or 3. And that has a huge effect on the supply chain because all of a sudden, the person who can afford to buy more products, he's buying more things. And then it has a knock-on effect because then the elderly and the poorer who want to buy more things because they need to stock it up. We've seen a shortage in the shelf life because goods are not coming in. They're not coming in as quick. So the shelf life is changing. They're getting less and less time they can store it. So this is a huge effect, and it's a topic that you could talk about for a whole day. But certainly at this moment in time, the consumers have been hitting just on oil pricing, obviously fuel costs. They're getting hit with supply chain, with shortages. They're being hit with the cost. Lurpak butter. It's a prime example. I love Lurpak butter. £4.50, which went up from £3.25 last year. It's £5.25 today. That is a ridiculous amount of money. So they're being passed on now.
Well, I would love to talk about it all day because I think it's fascinating and it's very real for folk out there. But alas, I only have 2 hours here on GB News. Right into the boss and say, give him another half hour and we'll have a longer conversation. Gold dust, background information there, Richard. Maybe Grant Shapps should go and see the Prime Minister a little earlier, perhaps do it this afternoon. But as always, a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. That's Richard Bartlett, supply chain expert and the owner of Export Unlocked. Now, sticking with our main theme, the cost of living crisis and the employment situation, but here's a twist. How can we help young folk, as Digby Jones was saying earlier on, to find the right job and do something that they'll really enjoy that will also pay their bills? Well, my next guest runs a brand new careers advice app to help students get into the right career. With 4 in 5 teachers saying that teacher training, that's when they do their PGCE after they've got their degree in a Bachelor of Education or whatever it might be, the teacher training bit simply didn't equip them to give careers advice. So it increasingly falls on universities and colleges to do that job. My guest says that one of the biggest problems is that students don't know what there is out there. And that guest is Dr. Alex Blur from the excellent Bournemouth University, Access and Participation Manager at the Arts University, to give it its proper name, in Bournemouth, where I'm delighted to say one of my nieces attended and really rated it very, very highly, and she's doing just fine. Careers advice is crucial. Why are so many schools poor at it?
With careers advice and guidance, I think schools are responsible for doing an awful lot of things, and they do an awful lot of things incredibly well. In teacher training, you can't expect anybody to know everything about all available careers that are out there, you know, even the careers guidance professionals who do it full time. So one of the things that we've done with Arts University Bournemouth that we think is incredibly important, because the creative industries are booming at the moment, there's going to be loads more jobs coming up in those areas, is to provide a mechanism to get loads and loads of information about potential careers and job roles that perhaps young people might not have ever thought of. You know, how many times do you go to the cinema and you see the credits at the end and see all of those job titles rolling past things like online editor, and wonder what exactly is involved in that. This app that we've created at Arts University Bournemouth, Wonder What, is an easy way for any student to be able to find out information about a whole range of different careers in the creative industries based on their interests and the things that appeal to them at the moment.
Does it also work for recruitment, as it were, so that if, I don't know, the BBC or GBNews or News International was looking for people in particular areas, can that go on the app as well and say, you know, if you've just qualified as a brilliant camera person or a photographer or whatever, here's one that might suit you?
That joining up, Alistair, is really, really important. And we know with the BBC recently, they've announced that they want to increase the number of people from working class or lower socioeconomic backgrounds in their workforce by 25%. We know as the creative industries as a whole, we'd need about 250,000 more individuals from working class backgrounds for it to be reflective of the society that it serves. This app is a first step, but it's only a first step. Arts University Bournemouth, you know, the whole reason I'm employed as a staff member is because we want to be a driving force for change in the sector. So we want more individuals from underrepresented or working class backgrounds coming to the university and studying and going on into those types of professions. And the only way that we can do that is to increase the knowledge of what's available. You know, with the media industry, for example, a lot of people find out about the different roles or how to get in through friends or contacts that already work in the industry. And we want to stop that. We want to demystify it. We want everybody to have all of the access to the relevant information that they need to be able to frame going on to a career in the media or art as an expectation if it's something that's right for them. You know, if you don't know anything about a particular career, it can seem very risky, and we need to minimise that risk and give young people the tools to be able to make those informed decisions.
Are you getting a positive response from the existing, I mean, the big giants, but also small emerging companies within the industry to help inform the app, as it were, with the work that you're doing at the Arts University, but to say, look, you know, we at BBC, we at ITV, we at GBNews, here's some information that might, not just because I want someone to employ, but here's how it works and here's what we can do. I used to be a governor at Ravensbourne College, and some of the tech people, particularly Sony, were utterly brilliant at that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is it's key points in a journey, isn't it? And we do an awful lot of work with employers. We're very plugged in with third sector organisations like the Social Mobility Foundation as well, who do a fantastic amount of work with their Social Mobility Employers Index. And it is about linking up those individual students with those opportunities, you know, whether it be through paid internships that we managed to secure through the summer for students who are currently at university, or working with employers and our partners to transfer the knowledge about the industry down into the school classroom if we're working in partnership with secondary schools or colleges within the region.
Also, finally, Alex, teaching them how to set up their own business, because I know, having been in this game for, blimey, over 40 years, that one of the biggest differences now is that when I started, everybody went to work for one of the big companies, whether it was a broadcaster or print media, it didn't matter. Everybody went, they did their training, they did their apprenticeship, all the rest of it. Nowadays, I keep bumping into brilliant young men and women who've come out of Arts University or Ravensbourne or wherever it might be, and they set up their own business. They are vloggers, they are bloggers, they're post-production people. They're just doing the most amazing stuff. Are you guiding them in that journey as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the portfolio career, as it were, and freelance work is absolutely huge within the creative industry. So as a university, we do a lot to equip young people coming into us with the entrepreneurial type skills, I guess, that they'd need in order to be successful, in partnership with an awful lot of organisations. But something else that we're really big on is the transferable skills that come from a career in the creative industries. You know, myself, I did a drama degree in Wolverhampton back when I was a student. I was never going to be a Hollywood film star. I would have liked to have been, of course, but unfortunately that's not the way that my career went. But what I did learn is teamwork, public speaking, you know, having a TV interview with yourself, Alistair, and being able to do that comfortably and effectively. All of these key skills that as technologisation increases, the workforce becomes more automated, that are actually the fundamental attributes that are going to be driving not just the creative industries, but the economy as a whole, and making sure we all can thrive and flourish. So I think that's a really important part of why we care about this as well.
It's utterly brilliant. Gold dust. I've said that twice this morning, but it's exactly what I wanted this programme to do today. Guide young folk to a better future, those who are out of work into a better future as well. I wish you all the very best of luck down there at the Arts University in Bournemouth, and thank you for finding time for me this Saturday afternoon. Dr. Alex Blower there.
It's wonderworks.co.uk.
Gotcha, mate. And he is the participation manager at Arts University Bournemouth. I think he'd been a very fine Hollywood star as well. Anyway, you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, old friends and now new friends as well. We've lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon, continuing that conversation on employment and the economy, and that is right after the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry with sunny spells, but cloudier with some showery rain in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest, it will be mostly dry in the afternoon with warm sunny spells for most, and just a low risk of an isolated light shower. The southeast will also have a dry afternoon with plenty of warm sunny spells. With light winds, it will feel pleasant in the sunshine. There will also be plenty of warm sunny spells across southern Wales this afternoon, but the odd light shower is also possible. We can expect slightly cloudier conditions across the northwest, but still some warm sunny spells at times. The odd shower is also possible here through the afternoon, but remaining dry for most. It's a similar story in northeast England, remaining dry this afternoon for most with some sunny spells, but the odd shower is also possible, feeling pleasant in the sunshine. There is a cloudier picture with some showery outbreaks of rain at times across southern Scotland, although the odd brighter spell is also likely. The weather for Northern Ireland follows a very similar theme this afternoon, remaining rather cloudy for all with only limited sunny spells, and some showery rain likely at times as well. It will remain rather cloudy with some rain in the northwest this evening, but drier and brighter elsewhere. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. It is half a minute past 1 o'clock, so I'm sorry if I overran slightly earlier. But you're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. If you've just joined us, welcome. If you've been with us since 12 o'clock, thank you even more. We're into the final hour of the programme, and I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio. We've still lots more still to come in that final hour, including developing further our top story and our top discussion. Why, when there are more job vacancies than ever, are people still unemployed? We'll hear what you think later on in the programme. We've had some brilliant ideas from guests already, so do keep those emails and those tweets coming in. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here again is Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule-breaking parties while it was being drafted. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says people deserve to know the truth. Well, former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have, because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of the potentially biggest rail strike in modern history, which could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Crisis talks are underway to try and keep passenger and freight trains running if it goes ahead. Secretary-General of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers Union, Mick Lynch, told GB News he's confident members will vote on strike action.
The alternative to that is surrender, where we just accept ever-continuing drops in standard of living. We surrender the argument of the cost of living to the rich in this country, and we strip out jobs and face a railway system that is degraded and could become a hostile environment for people that need passenger assistance, women travelling alone, and people that need assistance with ticket offices and all the rest of it. Plus, of course, the risks they're taking with the infrastructure itself.
Shoppers have seen hundreds of items on their food bill rise by more than 20% over the last 2 years as the number of supermarket discounts have fallen. Consumer Group, which analysed 21,000 items from 8 major supermarkets, and fizzy drinks saw the biggest average price rise. Chocolate saw the lowest. Police chiefs are planning to apologise over allegations of racism and discrimination within their ranks. In a report by the Police Chiefs Council due to be published next week, leaders will commit to being institutionally anti-racist. The report highlights how powers are being disproportionately applied to black people, and it also admits that having only 2 black officers reach Chief Constable or Assistant Commissioner rank in policing's history is a huge failure. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the southern port city of Mariupol. It's after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold there surrendered. Russia has now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as forces press for control of Ukraine's Donbass region as well. The Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat leader over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. Former Conservative MP Michael Brown told GBNews that Democrats are appealing to Irish-American voters ahead of the midterm elections.
I think this is just straightforward electioneering inside the Democratic Party from the point of view of Pelosi and her Democrat colleagues who are facing a very difficult fight in November. Secondly, bluntly, we've been here many times before, Paul. The fact is, Nancy Pelosi is bullying the British government. It will have to be solved. I think most people in the EU acknowledge that it is very unfair on the people of Northern Ireland.
Pharmacists will have greater freedoms to choose alternative hormone replacement therapy if the original prescription is out of stock. The government's HRT Supply Task Force, which was set up to tackle widespread shortages, has agreed to give pharmacists more control, and that's as low stock forced some menopausal women to do online swaps or buy medicine on the black market. Health Minister Maria Caulfield says the sudden increase in demand since the end of last year has put pressure on supplies.
To reassure women, there's over 70 products in the UK, and there's only really about 10 or less that are experiencing this shortage. So for the vast majority of products, we have got plenty of supply. And for those small numbers, we're introducing measures to make sure that those supplies are back up and running.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Alistair.
Coming up, a brilliant headhunter on our main theme about employment, and then the final thoughts of Lord Digby and Sir Hull, who are back in the studio with me. But before we get to that point, there'll be lots of time at the very end of the programme as well for your thoughts, but I just want to put these ones out to you now. This is an email that came in from Anthony, who says, the cost of living crisis is manufactured by those running things, running them into the ground or just pressing self-destruct. It's a view, Anthony. I share it back with folk listening to the conversation. I don't personally think there's any interest in anybody pressing the self-destruct button, but there we are. That's what you think. Penelope, however, raises a fascinating point that we will talk about. Penelope says, here in York, affordable housing is now virtually non-existent. Student lets prevail due to the rapid expansion of not one but 2 universities. People can't afford to live in York and North Yorkshire mostly. Too costly. Ergo, vacancies abound. Absolutely intriguing point, that, and Russ makes a similar point, but I'll come to some more of those at the end of the programme. Do keep all of those thoughts coming in, and also subscribe to YouTube, our channel there, so you can catch up on any of the earlier conversations that you may have missed. Now, as advertised, I'm delighted to be joined by my next guest, a new friend to me here on the programme, but delighted to meet him. It's Sim Hall, who's the Managing Director of Populous Recruitment Company. Sim, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. I've written the questions I wanted to ask you, but in fact, I'm going to cut straight to the chase with what Penelope said. When you're trying to match vacancies with folk who actually do want to work, what Penelope said reminded me of the famous Norman Tebbit comment, get on your bike and try and find a job. If that job is in York, it's quite tricky. Housing is an issue, isn't it?
Good afternoon, Alistair. Yes, no, thank you very much. And I was listening to the programme earlier. It is tricky. There is a challenge there. We are seeing an incredible amount of vacancies that are open in the country. One of the things, though, that some of those vacancies are being taken up. You know, we are seeing a record fall in unemployment rates, 3.7 across the country. However, to pick up on some things that Digby mentioned earlier, if we look regionally, perhaps that will give us a little bit more granularity and a bit more truth to the fact. What we're seeing in the region, I'll take the Tees Valley, which is a region very close to my heart, obviously. We've got it's the centre of a global green revolution. Incredibly skilled opportunities that are here, high-paying opportunities, but still there is that requirement there. And not 3.7 unemployed. Unfortunately, it's still at 5%, which is unfortunate. It has fallen, but it's still at 5%. Yeah. So there's obviously a mismatch there in skills requirement.
Let me put back to you, I'm glad that you were listening to the conversation with Digby as well, and he's going to come back in the conversation. I may want to comment on that in a moment. But let me also put to you, if I may, something I found utterly fascinating coming from a senior Labour Party figure, Stephen Timms, who used to be a Treasury Minister and an Employment Minister, where he basically said the government's contribution to doing what you're doing needs a shake-up. If Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State, came to you, Sim, and said, OK, you'd only run a business, but you're doing very well. You make a profit out of it. You're doing a good job of work. How can we apply some of what you do to job centres, employment exchanges, call them what you will? They've changed their name and brand over the years. But could those government operations be as slick and as effective as your lot?
To some extent, I'm obviously going to disagree on some level there, Alistair. But I think that, to look at the bigger picture, in fact, and perhaps not look at the mechanisms of it. We talked there about the regional requirement, and it's not just in the northeast, in the Tees Valley, that we have that. We have this diaspora that people left the region for the bright lights and big city for higher paid jobs in different areas. We now need to attract those people back to the regions for an immediate requirement. And Levelling Up, which has been done a fantastic job under our incredible mayor, Ben Houchin. I nearly gave him a knighthood there, but perhaps he needs it. But the Levelling Up is more about than just job creation. We need to create metropolitan areas. We need to create environments that you can that would attract these people back to these regions. This would not only solve some of the immediate requirements for these opportunities that are available, but also spread that knowledge, that experience to those that need upskilling and reskilling.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to weave in what you just said there with what Digby also said earlier about regionality and what my other friend from the Arts University of Bournemouth was saying. Of course, an awful lot of those new jobs in the media and creative industries are indeed in Salford and thereabouts, and that's a conscious decision made by the big broadcasters. Sim, let me put this to you, because I want it to be helpful and supportive and positive, but I have to be brutally honest in the conversation as well. It's my job. When I went public and said, this is great data from ONS, let's get out there now and find work for those to fill those vacancies. A lot of folk came back to me and said, look, hang on a minute, those vacancies are 0 hours contracts. The pay rates are just not up to it. It's not worth my while getting off my butt and seeking that job out. Have they got a point?
Not in my experience. The area that we focus on in the STEM sector, particularly at the moment in the life sciences and engineering, particularly the chemical sector, these are highly paid, skilled jobs that we're looking for. And there's a huge demand for it. We did a recent poll on some salary surveys, and indeed, for a chemical engineer in the northeast, it is actually higher average paid than it would be in other regions of the country. So, yes, there may well be some 0 hours. That's not my area of expertise. I'm focused on the STEM sector, and there's a huge demand for that talent.
Sim, let me
how
just
we deal with it is another matter.
Sim. Very, you've said it twice. STEM, science, technology. Remind me the other two.
Engineering, manufacturing.
Okay, fine. That's upmarket. That's top end. I today want to try and help those who are lower down, those who have to perhaps settle for something that's less glitzy, to put it quite bluntly. What can be done to help them? There are vacancies. They are not all in your territory. They're not all high tech, brilliant graduate jobs. They're Joe and Joanna Public jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, the job centres and that I haven't had personal experience of those can be slicker. The private sector can help in some regard in that in where that is. We certainly help our clients where there's pain at Populous, and whether that's operators, whether that's low skilled or semi skilled work, we can do that. There is an education there. There is that skilling that is still required. These are new areas. The North East has always been really good at adapting themselves and putting the money into adapting. There's a couple of solutions that I've put forward recently. One of them is, there's talk of a windfall tax in the energy companies, which they're obviously resisting. If that does come, I would suggest that is used partly, if not more, in this reskilling, in the opportunity to upskill local semi-skilled people in the different regions. That will help. So I think that's one area that we could do something, the government could do something, in addition to making these regions a little bit more attractive to bring the right people in.
Sim Hall, a real pleasure to meet you. Keep in touch. I'd love to continue the conversation and keep across what you're doing there with Populous. And thank you very much indeed for finding time to talk to us this afternoon. That's Sim Hall, the Managing Director of Populous Recruitment. Absolutely fascinating. As I said, Digby, who's been mentioned in dispatches during those conversations, and Sahal sitting here listening. I did ask you both to come back. I've written down notes of stuff that I wanted to put to you from other guests already, but you were fair bursting on what he was saying.
I thought it was an excellent snapshot on one problem, which was, he said, Teesside was close to his heart. It had got above average unemployment, 5%. And there was, his exact words were, Sim's words were, there was a green revolution going on. Yeah. Now, that is a snapshot of the problem, isn't it? Because you've got tomorrow's economy, and you've got, I would probably guess, your 5% are people who haven't got the skills to match tomorrow's economy. Mm. And if someone's going to find the money, Sim seemed to say one solution would be a windfall tax. Yes. Now, one problem against a windfall tax would be that you and I, and most people watching this, have got a pension fund in some way or other, and as shareholders in these energy companies, the profits do filter down into all our pension funds. So that
is staggering. Shell and BP about 10%.
Staggering, absolutely amazing. And so, we shoot ourselves in the foot to say windfall tax. Against that, those in favour of windfall tax, not only would it be electorally popular, but the other point is, if we could, and I think there's something in this, if we could use it as the sword of Damocles and say to these energy companies, we want you, it's a very good example, Teesside, we want you to spend some of this excess profit in skilling the people, not necessarily just schools, although schools would be tomorrow's generation, good thing, but also these people who are sitting there unemployed, get in there with your money, not taxpayers' money, and get them skilled into tomorrow's businesses. Yeah. Now, do that, we'll leave you alone. Yeah. Don't do that, and we will touch you. Now, I think that's a good idea.
Tie that thought together with the other thing, Sahal, that my little eyes lit up when the guy from Bournemouth Arts University was talking about matching skilled kids who've borrowed and committed to 3 years of training, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, kids who have gone to catering college, either learnt to cook or to run a restaurant, do exactly what you've done, matching what people like you at the front line trying to create wealth and make a living need with kids who say, yeah, I quite fancy working for Sahal. How do we get the two together? Did that excite you, or is that pie in the sky?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, it's a great initiative to have because, you see, the thing is that you gotta do something that you love.
Yes.
Otherwise,
But in your trade, you've also got to be skilled.
Absolutely. You have to have the skills. I mean, if I employ a chef who I want him to cook food and that I'm going to sell to the customers, he needs to know what he's doing. He needs to have the qualifications. He needs to know the food, the health and safety, the hygiene certificates, and all the things that comes with it. And plus he needs to know how to cook great food. Now that comes with training and qualification in him doing the courses that needs to be done in order for him to achieve that. So I can't just pick someone off the streets and say, okay, well, you're unemployed.
If I came to eat at your restaurant, I wouldn't want you to have just picked someone. I want them to know what they're doing.
Exactly, absolutely. Yeah. So everyone, the waiters, the front of house, that they're going to serve the customers, they need to know how the appropriate ways.
Only because the clock is slightly against us, and you've both been kind enough to stay on for longer than we originally booked you for, for which I'm genuinely grateful. Again, my eyes lit up, or my ears pricked up, call it what you will, when Richard Bartlett was talking about the supply chain.
Yeah.
I mean, the supply chain doesn't only mean getting food on shelves in supermarkets, which he and I talked about at length.
Yeah.
It's also getting food to your restaurant that you then cook and process.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about the supply chain here many, many times. We don't have enough lorry drivers, but we have unemployed people.
The HGV crisis of a few months ago now, you don't hear about it now. And one of the reasons is because there was a mismatch and you had got a paucity of HGV qualified drivers. Now, that is a skill. That's a skilling up issue. And what you had to do was do three things to make it work. You had to pay them more. You had to get them to have a licence. But the third thing was treat them well.
Yes.
And something I've always believed in all my adult life, let alone the CBI and Trade Minister and everything else, is what I call socially inclusive wealth creation, which is I'm passionate about businesses being allowed to make money, but they must do it if they're going to take a proper part in society and come to government with clean hands in a socially inclusive way. So it's not just pay them, it's skill them, it's train them, be sensitive to the environment and reach down, round and under people who can't and take them to a place where they can. And I think that is a duty of wealth creation, but then in return, wealth creation can say, now I'm going to go and make money. And I don't want to hear any more, like the news clip from the guy from the RMT, Mick Lynch, who's used words like surrender, the rich, defeat, victory. We're in this. We've got to take the whole of society together forward. And that will mean that public sector, private sector, trade unions, and also government, in my view, at a local level, have got to come to this party together because you've got the bedrock you never had in the 70s, you've got a resilient economy, and what we've got to do now is take it forward. So with HGV drivers, what people started doing, let's get more women into HGV driving. Yeah. That of its own, that will mean that they get looked after better, and that is an excellent thing. They're not treated like rubbish, and make sure that they are now looked after and paid well. Oh, what a surprise. Yeah. People want to do the job.
At the sharp end again, which is how I introduced you when we began the conversation, are you experiencing as a restaurateur supply chain problems? Are you finding it's either more difficult to get stuff that you need, raw materials and stock, or that you really do feel the pain of having to pay a lot more for it?
No, I mean, the prices have risen. All the supplies.
But the deliveries are okay?
The deliveries were, sometimes they're out of stock because you don't get what we want. You have to wait for weeks. And the customers are asking for that item. We don't have it because we don't have the supplies.
That is a supply chain issue.
That's right. So we do have the supply. We are.
It's actually not a price issue in that respect. It's availability, isn't it?
Yeah. There isn't enough.
Scarce resources, prices go up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The opposite of that is money supply.
Well, and by the way, you've got governments across the Western world who've printed money like crazy for 8 years, created inflation, and now are saying, oh dear, what are we going to do about that?
I don't think I've ever seen the government turn on Independent Bank of England with quite such verve. The final point is housing, but use it as you will to make your final comments, because I so wanted to talk to both of you, and you have delivered absolutely in spades. Been there, done it guy, chaired more companies, put companies together over the years and run the CBI. A truly impressive young man who's come here, set a business up, wealth creation and employing folk. When you hear Sim talk about the housing crisis, that there may be jobs, I mean, supposing you were to try and set up a restaurant in York as your next venture, Penelope warns you, you may not be able to get the staff because they've got nowhere to live that they can afford, so you can't set that up. How worried are you about that kind of social dimension to all of this?
Well, just like SM mentioned, you know, for example, people who, they want to go to the glamorous city, they want to go to the big lights and all of that. You know, like you said, you know, we need to create similar environment in other cities, not just in London, not in the big cities, so that the young generation who likes that lifestyle can be in those cities outside of London, in a countryside, who can create better jobs. I mean, for example, I can move Egoland today. I can open an Egoland in New York or somewhere in you know, Lancashire. Or
You'd be
something
very
like
welcome in Birmingham.
You know, I like Birmingham. You know,
and you're very good. You've only mentioned it twice. And I said you could say it 5 times. And I did. Brilliant. Time is this time against us. I want to end with you. Because what I'm going to bank from my conversation, and you always tend to deliver it, is that whatever the nature of the problems are, you are an optimist, whether it was your example of supply chain, whether it's a question of using. If a windfall tax comes, then let's use it to train and shift people and what have you. We're not going to hit the wall irreparably, are we?
No, certainly not. And the Western world will not hit the wall irreparably. I would hope that, I mean, Germany and France are in trouble too, and I would hope that the EU would allow them to pull that up. Never underestimate America. Their power of a recovery has always been excellent. They've got massive issues. A lot of them are social. And we have always been, in or out the EU, this is an EU argument, we've always been a globally aspected country. We've always been trading around the world. We're one of the great trading nations. Yeah. And that, we have a resilient economy. Where we've got to do it, Alistair, more than anything else, is just understand that the great divisions of manufacturing, creative industries, construction, are over. You know, we are, per capita, the biggest creative industries. And I thought Alex's piece was excellent from Bournemouth. We are one of the great countries in creative industries. But if you've got a manufacturing...
I've got to stop you at the end of the sentence.
If you've got a manufacturing company with designers, they're creative industries. They're not manufacturing, but they're in a manufacturing environment. You have to pull everybody together and stop these divisions in either way. That is the way this country will carry on being great.
There are more semicolons in that sentence than full stops. Digby, it's always a pleasure. My thanks to you, my love to Pat as well. Thanks for coming over to do it.
Pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure having you back on the programme. I learn so much from you every time. I wish you every success.
Brilliant.
You
Thank
deserve
you
it. You absolutely do.
Thank you for having me.
You come back and see us again. We'll do another.
Absolutely.
We'll do another rain check in a couple of 3 months' time.
Yes.
Great to see you, Sal.
Thank you very much.
We have plenty more to come in the remaining 35 minutes of Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, I'll be talking to a retail expert on how we can make our money go further. Yep, all practical help is here. After a survey from Which magazine found that food prices have risen 20% in the last couple of years. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry with sunny spells, but cloudier with some showery rain in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest, it will be mostly dry in the afternoon with warm sunny spells for most, and just a low risk of an isolated light shower. The southeast will also have a dry afternoon with plenty of warm sunny spells. With light winds, it will feel pleasant in the sunshine. There will also be plenty of warm sunny spells across southern Wales this afternoon, but the odd light shower is also possible. We can expect slightly cloudier conditions across the northwest, but still some warm sunny spells at times. The odd shower is also possible here through the afternoon, but remaining dry for most. It's a similar story in northeast England, remaining dry this afternoon for most with some sunny spells, but the odd shower is also possible, feeling pleasant in the sunshine. There is a cloudier picture with some showery outbreaks of rain at times across southern Scotland, although the odd brighter spell is also likely. The weather for Northern Ireland follows a very similar theme this afternoon, remaining rather cloudy for all with only limited sunny spells, and some showery rain likely at times as well. It will remain rather cloudy with some rain in the northwest this evening, but drier and brighter elsewhere. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's about 1:30, just 30 seconds short of that. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. We've been talking about food prices and all sorts of stuff today. The first harvest of the farming year is underway in Northern Ireland. With the expected grain shortage, animal feed is expected to hit record prices. Tell me about it. So the crop of grass known as silage will be crucial for the winter feed. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has more.
Our country lanes may look tranquil, an ideal place for leisure, but in truth, they're on the factory floor of our food production. Heavy machinery is already gathering the first of this year's crops, and with rising energy costs and changes in subsidies, what happens in farms over the next short while will dictate how our economy will perform. This harvest is vital for the agri-food sector. It is the harvest of the food of our food, the ingredients of our ingredients. It is the primary building blocks of our economy, and this will decide the price of our food within the next 12 months.
It's basically grass, so it is, but and it's the feed for the cattle for the winter. So we need to make as good a silage as we can for the winter for our cattle to be able to produce milk, beef, or whatever type of farming you're in that you're using grass, silage.
Adam George is a fifth-generation farmer and explains how the second crop will be more costly.
Once you get the first cut off, you have to put fertiliser onto it and slurry. The fertiliser has more than trebled in prices from what it was this time last year. So it's going to make the likes of our second cut silage very expensive.
In these times where basics like energy and the price of food hold the balance of our budgets, what else can be done to alleviate pressures on our farms?
I think they need to look at the legislation. You know, there's a lot of red tape in place that we have to adhere to that ties our hands. You know, the likes of how much fertiliser we can sow, when we can spread our slurry, you know, how many cattle we can keep for the amount of ground we have. You know, all that legislation's in place. We have to adhere to it, and it restricts us.
Food security is now at the top of every government's list. Predictions of apocalyptic pricing and food availability must prompt action to help farms produce more of our own food. Dougie Beattie, GB News, County Down.
Fascinating stuff there. Silage, something I'm afraid we in the equestrian world are fairly familiar with as well. But Dougie comes up with the line of the year there for me, the food of our food. And tell me about it. I know with grain for chickens and ducks and other things that we keep at home there. That all comes at a time when Which magazine, which I mentioned, I think, right at the very top of the programme, is reporting that food prices have risen by more than 20% over the last 2 years, partly due to the loss of discounts, partly due to what's going on in Ukraine and the rest of it. But it's well written up in the newspapers. If you want more detail on that, it is all there. The Daily Mail have done a particularly good take on it, with Justin Birtles there writing about it too. We've got 27 minutes to go, but we've still got plenty still to come this afternoon, including continuing that cost of living crisis. Should the police go soft on those who steal out of desperate need? But first, let's take you up to date with all of the news. Here once again is Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 1:33. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray over the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule-breaking while it was being drafted. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Could I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have, because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history, as 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies vote on action over pay. Network sources say it could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared a travel ban on 963 Americans, including President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and CIA Chief William Burns. And Australia's Labour Party is set to topple the ruling Conservatives in the national elections. That's according to Australia's national broadcaster. But it may have to form a minority government. Initial vote counts show both parties will likely fall short of the required 76 seats to form a majority, losing ground to environment and climate-focused parties like the Greens and the Independents. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Alistair.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes to 2 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. My final segment addresses what I thought was a remarkable story. In the context of the cost of living crisis, police officers have been told that they should use discretion over stealing to eat. The new Chief Inspector of Her Majesty's Constabulary, one Andy Cook, says crimes of poverty should be dealt with in the best way possible, and that may mean discretion over prosecution. So I immediately wanted to talk to two people who really, really knew what they were talking about. The first is a very good friend of mine, Sir Bob Neal. He is the chair of the Justice Select Committee and Conservative Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst. Bob, my eyes dropped. I was aghast at this. Not from a social worker or some libertarian writing in a newspaper, but from Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary. Tell me I'm wrong if I am.
Well, good afternoon, Alistair. Good to see you again. I think in those stark terms, it is pretty surprising. I think we maybe need to drill down into a little bit to get what I think the Chief Inspector was meaning, and also put it into a proper context. If he's saying that in the very rare instances where someone who has no previous convictions was caught stealing a very low value item, and it transpired that they were doing that because they didn't have any money and generally didn't have the money to buy food, then actually there's nothing particularly new in that, because inevitably with people with no previous convictions, the police can perhaps give a caution first. But where I think people will be concerned is if this was a suggestion that somehow A, there was a large problem of this, and B, that should be a general reason for going easy on shoplifting, and that will be wrong on both counts. What I've always found, both having visited some of the convenience stores in my own constituency, but even more over my years as a barrister and talking to many judges, is that overwhelmingly shoplifting is driven not by poverty, but by addiction. About 75% plus, and many judges would tell me more, but certainly at least 75%, most people would say, of shoplifting, acquisitive crime, stealing from shops, is driven to feed either drug addiction or alcohol addiction, and often related mental health issues that go with it. So that's either stealing alcohol or things that you can drink or sell, or stealing other items to sell. Now that's the really big problem. That's the main cause of shoplifting. Secondly, invariably, people with first offences and no previous convictions are unlikely to be charged under our system. But when you get repeat offences, then I think there's a broader obligation to society to do something about it. We have to remember that you're talking about small businesses very often here. And if people are repeatedly stealing, then whatever the level of the products that they're stealing, that creates a problem for the honest shopkeeper. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, particularly some of the those who are addicted who are stealing, that's accompanied with some pretty unpleasant and threatening behaviour. So what I don't want it, and it certainly shouldn't be, and what concerned me was any suggestion from the Chief Inspector that shoplifting should be minimalised. It's not a victimless offence. There are victims. It causes distress and harm to the people who work in those shops, and it causes economic damage too.
Yeah, fascinating. And I didn't interrupt because I wasn't aware of that argument about the addiction part of it. And I think that is important that people understand that. But also, you and I are at one, not for the first time, that perhaps Mr. Cook could have been a little more cautious in his choice of words in confirming something that has tended to be the case when it's in the hands of good and sensible police officers, men and women. But you mentioned in passing there, Bob, as I know because I've known you for so long, that you're also a magistrate and a practising lawyer too. In the more serious cases, I kind of feel I want you as a magistrate to decide whether the accused deserves a little bit of compassion, a little bit of understanding, or in the more serious cases, even a judge. I'm not sure I want a Bobby on the beat making that decision there and then, because it's that old thing about encouraging the others, isn't it?
Well, I hate to correct an old friend. I'm not actually a magistrate, Alistair. But I was referring to many magistrates I know and talk to.
I'm sorry, I thought you were a magistrate, but you are a practising barrister. Sorry, I do apologise for that. But anyway, back to my point.
Have been for many years, and in the criminal court.
So shouldn't the bench decide these things rather than the Bobby on the beat?
Well, again, I think there's a little bit of scale in it, and that's why I've never had a problem, and it's never been novel that people who got very small value items where there is no previous convictions, before you get them into the criminal justice system and risk them getting a conviction, which can then have consequences if you want them to get out of offending behaviour. That's the point at which I think the police are entitled to have a measure of discretion. That might include as well pointing in the direction of some of the actors that can help them. And we've always had a policy of diverting people at the very lowest level and first time. That's the other point of it. When it starts repeat offending and clearly getting into that type of behaviour, then yes, that's when the justice system does have to intervene, and then for the give them one more chance, counting rehabilitation or some help through admission or some other times.
Sure. I think we're beginning to get a problem with the signal, Bob, so I'm going to park it there. But I want to apologise while I've got you on the programme for not being able to have that conversation we were so looking forward to, both of us, about the Queen's Awards to further and higher education. But if you were listening earlier, you would have heard the Arts University of Bournemouth putting itself forward for an award, I think, in a couple of years' time for finding jobs for young people in the creative sector. So we'll still have that conversation, Bob, one day. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed. That was Sir Bob Neal, not a former magistrate, my era, but certainly a practising barrister and a very good friend of mine and a good friend of this programme. Terrific food for thought from Bob there. And as I said, right at the beginning, I was delighted to be joined not only by him, but also from someone else, right at the very front line of this issue, and it is James Lohman. James is the chief executive of the Association of Convenience Stores, more likely to be hit, perhaps, than some of the big supermarkets with all of their CCTV cameras and the rest of it. Were you able to hear what Bob was saying, James?
I was, Alistair, yeah, and I mean, he's right in talking about every case is treated on its merits. I'm afraid that there is a bit of a misconception that when there's theft from shops, that there's ever been a time when, police cars with blue lights have come around the corner and arrest people. We've all pre-cost of living crisis, whatever point you want to say we got into that, we received often very sketchy support from the police, and many times members would report shop theft and it would not be investigated properly. And the how I would characterise theft in our members' stores was repeat offenders, usually trying to fund an addiction, and stealing to order, stealing for resale. And now we're into this, the heart of this cost of living crisis, which of course I'm afraid is going to get worse. We're seeing reports about stealing for need and people in particularly difficult situations. What we are seeing when I speak to our members, they are seeing exactly the same as they saw a year ago and 2 years ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. The people who steal from shops are doing so to fund addiction. They are repeat offenders, and or they are stealing to order. So I think there's a bit of a misconception about tough times for many families up and down the country being reflected in the change in that behaviour. That's not what our members are saying at all.
And that is such an important point, James, and I'm drill into it just a teeny wee bit to make it crystal clear, because it's kind of what I suspected when I read this as well, is that if we've been suffering a genuine cost of living crisis for 6 to 12 months, which I think is reasonable because of the energy prices, but not 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're saying here on this programme that, in fact, the incidence of shoplifting's not really changed over that period of time. It's always been a problem for the reasons that you and Bob agree on. People who are addicted, people who are nicking stuff to flog, to buy drugs or whatever it might be. It hasn't rocketed because the going's got rough out there.
It's gone up, but I don't necessarily think, well, we can't link that to economic circumstances. But we have seen an increase in shop theft over a period of time. But I think the drivers of that are sadly the same as they've been for a long time. And you know, Neil referred to it there. You know, how do we then deal with this rather than getting into sort of this terrible cycle we're into? Well, we have to help those people with addiction problems. We have to find ways of getting them out of that cycle, and that means that there needs to be proper intervention from the police and from the court system. Not just to put people in prison for a long time. It's not allowable under the guidance anyway, but to divert them into programs and supports, which will mean that they're not in a position where they're in their own circumstances, they're having to steal from our members and others all the time. So there needs to be a really, and this is not new, this has been happening for a long time, but we need to up the amount of support we're giving to try and break that cycle.
I can't not ask you a few questions about our main theme today. Because I said to the team I was thrilled that you were coming on board. To say, through you, to your sector, thank you for doing a brilliant job, not least during lockdown. We, living in the countryside, utterly relied upon one or two convenience stores in our neck of the woods. They've really done a terrific job. But I noticed the other day, no names, no pack drill, because I'm not paid to advertise them, but they have done a good job. Both of them have now got signs up in the window saying recruiting. Jobs available, whether it's Saturday morning or what have you. How's the sector doing generally right now?
Well, picking on that issue first about labour and about trying to get people in working in stores, attracting and keeping colleagues in stores. We are suffering from the same challenges that many others are in hospitality, distribution, warehousing, food production, in terms of a squeeze in the labour market. And we saw the figures earlier this week, which really brought that out very clearly. We as a sector are slightly insulated from that because we've got a very diverse range of people we employ, a very diverse range of ages, and we do very well in recruiting from the local community, where one of the great benefits that we have and things we can offer people is that we're close to where they live. More than half of the people who work in convenience stores walk to work. Most people come from that local community. So that gives us an advantage, but we are not immune to this very tight labour market, finding and keeping people, training and developing those people, where we've got a really good record of offering secure, flexible jobs close to where people live. But yeah, there are challenges for sure.
And do you think enough is being done? I was intrigued to hear Stephen Timms, a former Labour senior minister in the Blair and Brown era, saying that the government, whether it's Tory, Labour, genuinely doesn't matter in this context, should be doing more hands-on to mix and match. So if your people or the big chains of convenience stores or even just one local one in Blackburn or wherever it might be needs a couple of people, then the government can kick in and behave professionally like your members do and like Populous, who is on as a recruitment agency, was saying. You really need to polish up their act to meet that demand with supply.
And that's what job centres should do. That's that local engagement, and our members do recruit from job centres. They also often recruit from, actually the main one is word of mouth. The main one is people who already work in the business saying there's someone else who wants to work. And often that's not because that person just lost their job. They might have changed circumstances. They might be at a point where their kids are a bit older and they can do some part-time hours, or maybe where they have left a full-time job and they may be into retirement or semi-retirement, but they still want a job to bring in more money, but also to fit around their lifestyle. So that flexibility is an advantage for us, and it is a very local piece of work to match people up.
Yeah, brilliant. So helpful. I wish you well and all of your members, James. The first time we've met and talked, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it and shed some really positive light, both on the shoplifting problem, which Bob Neal did as well, but also on what it's like for that sector that so many of us have found a godsend in normal times, but particularly in recent times. Best of luck to you, James, and thanks for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. The excellent James Lohman there, Chief Executive of the Association of Convenience Stores, and hurrah for them. I've really enjoyed these last couple of hours, and I sincerely hope that you have. Either I've annoyed you, or I've amused you, or I've stimulated thought, because you have been exceeding busy in sending your messages in. So I think they'll shout in my ear in a moment, but I think I've probably got about 2 or 3 minutes left before we finish. So let's start straight away with Gary. Check out the executive salaries and profit levels of the companies, plural, who claim that they cannot fill vacancies, and then look at the salaries for the vacancies. I think Digby nodded to that point as well. Let's just remember that there are responsibilities for companies as well, and a job does require and command a decent proper wage. Nobody should be working, drawing a salary and picking up benefits. I've made that crystal clear on this programme many, many times. So thanks for that, Gary. John says, remember, a percentage of people on benefits have disabilities that act as barriers to employment, and some employers don't like making reasonable adjustments. We wanted that one in. Thank you, John, for making the point a number of you have done. I am not saying for one moment that if you have a genuine disability, if you need particular help because you literally cannot work at all, that you should suffer any penalty. Quite the opposite. And please, hand upon heart, I really do mean that. What I'm saying is people who actually don't need certain benefits, who draw them nevertheless, or don't even look for a job because they can make ends meet on that benefit. But not, I repeat, not anyone who is genuinely facing a disability. Thank you, John. Molly, I know one or two Brits who consider themselves too superior than everyone else to go out and look for or get a job. I'm not sure I do, Molly, but I do think I understand with great clarity exactly the point that you're making, and so thank you for making it. Elizabeth joins the conversation. Because most of these jobs are minimum wage with long hours, part-time or 0-hour contracts, a lot of people don't want to work for £9 an hour in poor working conditions. I can't blame them. Elizabeth, what you can do is join me in blaming the employers for not paying enough, not running a business efficiently and profitably enough to pay a decent wage, and also, crucially, provide decent conditions in which they can work. So thanks, Elizabeth. Ron? This will always continue for as long as benefits remain a viable career option for fit and able people. That is a red rag to a bull to many people, but Ron, I'm in sympathy with a lot of what you say, and I think even Stephen Timms from the Labour side of the equation was saying earlier on, it shouldn't be an easy option. It should be, where are we? John said about folk with disability, when it was set up back in 1944 in the Beveridge Report, it didn't say it solves everything and it's easy peasy. It was as much about responsibility as a safety net. So thank you very much indeed, Ron, for raising that point. Paul, these people who moan, who don't work and still have holidays abroad, look at the airports, they still smoke at £14 a packet and still sit in pubs all day, go to football matches. I'm retired and worked all my life. Packed up smoking, packed up having a drink when my kids needed something. They want money for doing nothing. Harsh, Paul, I suspect true in some cases. David, interesting to note that people on universal credit got an extra £20 top-up during the COVID pandemic, whereas people on the job seekers allowance waiting to be transferred to universal credit didn't get the extra top-up. Does the government think that people on benefits like job seekers didn't experience the same hardship as those on universal credit? Brilliant point to end on, David, thank you. And Peter Lilly was making a very similar point last week. That's all we have time for today. I'm delighted to say I'll be back tomorrow afternoon at midday. Until then, have a terrific Saturday afternoon and evening. From all of us here, bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking mostly dry with sunny spells, but cloudier with some showery rain in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest, it will be mostly dry in the afternoon with warm sunny spells for most, and just a low risk of an isolated light shower. The southeast will also have a dry afternoon with plenty of warm sunny spells. With light winds, it will feel pleasant in the sunshine. There will also be plenty of warm sunny spells across southern Wales this afternoon, but the odd light shower is also possible. We can expect slightly cloudier conditions across the northwest, but still some warm sunny spells at times. The odd shower is also possible here through the afternoon, but remaining dry for most. It's a similar story in northeast England, remaining dry this afternoon for most with some sunny spells, but the odd shower is also possible, feeling pleasant in the sunshine. There is a cloudier picture with some showery outbreaks of rain at times across southern Scotland, although the odd brighter spell is also likely. The weather for Northern Ireland follows a very similar theme this afternoon, remaining rather cloudy for all with only limited sunny spells, and some showery rain likely at times as well. It will remain rather cloudy with some rain in the northwest this evening, but drier and brighter elsewhere. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in.